Hi, I'm Adrian. I'm 50 years old. And in 2017, when I was 46, I was diagnosed with chronic lymphocytic leukemia. It happened as a bit of a shock to me, actually. I'd been quite healthy and quite well. Earlier that week, I'd gone walking in the mountains in Switzerland, but I collapsed one day on the way home from work, was diagnosed with pneumonia. And during that illness, they realized that my immune system wasn't working too well and that my lymphocyte count was high, and I was diagnosed with CLL. I was put on watch and wait, which for some people can last a decade or more, but for me, it only lasted 15 months. As a doctor, I obviously know a fair bit about the clinical research, and so I did a bit of research on my own. It was going to be difficult for me to get one of the selective treatments outside of a trial. So I wasn't really sure what to do, and I became quite pressured and quite stressed about how to make this decision. And it might sound odd, but it felt like a bit of a relief almost to allow a computer to make the choice for me. Obviously, it's a bit weird getting to the point where you realize that actually your doctor doesn't know what's best for you, you don't know what's best for you, and your research doesn't give you a clear answer. But to me, that's the ideal time for a trial, because then you don't know. If you know what's best for you, then you probably ought to go down that route. But if you're uncertain and you think, well, any of these three treatments that were on offer to me through the trial would be good, they would all work. They had slightly different side effect profiles, and it was hard to know which would work best for me as an individual. So I quite like the idea that, in a way, as an individual, one of these treatments would be better for me, and it might not be the same one that would be better for another patient. And so even with the data, we wouldn't know for sure which the best treatment was for me. Well, at least this way, it's a computer making the decision randomly for me. So I've got an equal chance of getting whatever is the right treatment for me. But the other major thing, of course, for me was the idea of giving something back. And I guess this is where my professional background did make a difference, because I'd spent more than a decade working in clinical research myself and encouraging other doctors and helping other doctors who are running these trials and helping to supervise them, helping to run the trials and design the trials. And so I figured that as I'd obviously benefited and the community had benefited from so many other people who had gone before and put themselves forward for these trials, that there was a sort of altruistic part of me that wanted to give back. Well, none of these drugs would be available to us now if other people hadn't taken the risks, if you like, and taken on board these clinical treatments. And sometimes actually by taking on a treatment a bit earlier than you might otherwise have been able to get it, you might actually gain a benefit. And I've certainly got friends who took treatments that are now considered old school, but when they took them, say 20 years ago, they were very much new school. And if they hadn't have taken them, they would probably have died. The treatment itself worked really well. I was actually randomized to the old-fashioned treatment. It's well known what the side effects are and what you're dealing with. I did get quite unwell at the beginning. That would have probably happened no matter what treatment I had. You kind of get used to being in hospital, and they know what to do and they know how to look after you. And so as at the end of the treatment cycle, I got to the point where my cancer was completely in remission, to the point that they weren't able to detect any cells using the tests that they have. And the doctors told me that there's almost certainly some cancer cells left there, and it will at some point come back in my case, although sometimes, you know, even with these blood cancers, they can be got rid of altogether. So I'm left with that uncertainty of knowing, you know, when's it going to come back? But for me personally, I've also been left with quite a bit of damage to the immune system. So I do deal with infections. I do try and make the best of how I am today. You know, I have some limitations. I'm not able to work. I'm stronger than I was at my weakest point. And I know for a lot of people, they get a lot better than I have. Many people bounce straight back and are able to work, or even able to work all the way through treatment. I'm very glad I had the trial, though. I feel like, you know, my information may help people decide which treatments to use in the future. And I'd definitely go for another trial if I was offered it. I mean, I know we don't like to have unnecessary tests, but it just means that you feel like you've been looked after well and assessed well, and they should explain to you in great detail what the options are. And I think it's very important, if you're considering a trial, to think very carefully about the options that are being given to you. But it's really important to make sure you understand what all the options are that you're being offered, and that you're happy to take any of them, and that you understand the benefits and risks of each of them, and why it is that your doctor feels that these treatments are suitable for you. If there's one treatment that you feel very strongly about, that you really want to have, or that you think is definitely best for you, you're probably better off trying to get that treatment outside of a trial. because it takes a certain mindset to be willing to allow the computer to decide for you. And sometimes for you not to even know what treatment you're on. I knew what treatment I was on, but sometimes you won't know. And some people find that quite difficult to deal with. And so if that's you, we'll leave it to the people who feel more comfortable. But the only way you'll know really is by looking into it. And so I think going for that screening appointment, understanding, having all your questions answered, making sure you know what's involved, whether there's going to be any additional visits, whether that's going to be a problem for you, what that all looks like, so that you know what you're getting yourself into, because you might have to come to more visits and spend longer at the hospital and such like. But at the same time, there's a reward involved because you feel like you're being well looked after, and you've usually got a phone number of a nurse or a researcher that you can ring at any time with any of your questions. And so that's a definite bonus. So, I mean, for me, a clinical trial is an opportunity for you as an individual to get a treatment that may well not be available to you outside of the trial. And so that can be a benefit to you, and also gives you the opportunity to have extra care, potentially. But also it's an opportunity for us to give back. And I think for society as a whole, it's really important that patients are willing to volunteer so that we can get new medicines, because without clinical trials, we'll never get new medicines and we'll just be stuck with the old ones. And, you know, when you look at blood cancer as a whole, it wasn't that many years ago where there really weren't very many treatments at all, where, you know, it was chemotherapy or nothing. And thanks to the sacrifices of many patients who've gone before, we've now got a wealth of treatments and more coming down all the time, and therefore an improved quality of life, hopefully, but certainly also an improved quantity of life. So yes, trials can actually save lives down the line. Even if it's not your own, they can certainly save later lives. And sometimes they might give you a treatment that would work for you that wouldn't be available for you otherwise.